the 1990s, a war erupted over the cyberpunk movement's identity. The battlefield? Our culture. A new brand of science fiction was taking over the television sets, theater screens, and bookshelves. No longer were we limited to the Golden Age era works of Asimov, Heinlein, and Clarke. A new wave of rebellious, less optimistic fiction emerged. These works showed us a grim visage of a dark future, metropolises flooded with toxic rain, bright neons, and an underbelly of crime and poverty, where the fabric of society is bursting at the seams. But even this new subgenre, cyberpunk, was becoming fractured. Its identity was shifting away from individual creatives, instead being shoved front and center into the mainstream by big entertainment. Newer media seemed to adopt the style of cyberpunk, but ignored its substance. The definition of cyberpunk was blurred. Academically, it was the literary movement of the 1980s that took our eyes away from the stars and turned them down toward the dismal city streets. High-tech, low-life, as it's often defined. Informally, cyberpunk has become shorthand for any dark future media, whether that's accurate or not. Definitions range from being a geek who likes industrial metal music to being an anarchist hacker, from a delusionist who thinks they are in the future to simply carrying a Logitech scanner on your belt. Cyberpunk's densest decade, with a non-stop stream of novels, films, video games, and TV shows, also saw previously unrelated media, such as The X-Files, Billy Idol, Marvel Comics, and even Batman don the cyberpunk cowl. In the 10 years since the genre was founded, the net had become a real thing. We saw the rapid deployment of many online information and commerce hubs, now used daily by billions. Cyberspace now had to be explained using domain names, email addresses, and megabytes, instead of stylish technobabble. There was a shift from the fantastic and unattainable toward the practicality of personal computers and virtual reality. The seemingly limitless possibilities of technology inspired a sort of society-wide existentialism. This movement challenged our own perception of reality. Is our world real? Or could this all be a dream or simulation created by unfathomable forces? But one thing hadn't changed. Cyberpunk was still the coolest thing around, and we got a hell of a decade of thematic entertainment and a rapidly evolving culture that we would remember for generations to come.
I hope you brought your mop, 'cause you're gonna clean this up. They should have locked you up. Little forget-me-not. You're not a part-time god. You're not a part-time god. You took a full-time job. You didn't even want. You're not a part-time.
It became clearer when the machine crashed. Everything went to hell, and the CPU began spewing out random bits. The image on the screen was a bitmap, a literal rendering of the contents of a particular portion of a computer's memory. When the computer crashed and wrote gibberish into the bitmap, the result was something that looked vaguely like static on a broken television set. A snow crash. Neal Stephenson.
The immediate satisfaction of films, shows, and video games overshadowed the literary side of cyberpunk, but written works still shined throughout the 90s. Their reach had waned over time, but continued to offer insightful, fresh looks at the future of technology and society. The next generation of cyberpunk was a lot more self-aware. Newcomers like Neal Stephenson deconstructed the tropes and cliches of the genre, while veterans like Gibson and Sterling continued to thrive. But in terms of raw numbers, nothing ever came close to the phenomenon of Neuromancer. Nevertheless, Stephenson would help redefine our culture with his 1992 novel, Snow Crash. a masterful story that plays both to existing cyberpunk themes and mocks the traditions of the genre. The novel thrusts you into absurdity early on. The Deliverator, a man named hero protagonist, is on an urgent mission for the Mafia to deliver a pizza. Yes, seriously. He crosses paths with a spunky skateboarder, YT. She distracts him by hitching onto his car, causing him to crash. YT saves his skin from mob retaliation by offering to help with his delivery, and the two strike up an unlikely partnership. Hero is unmatched in his hacking skills, and a bit of a sword-fighting legend in the metaverse, the book's virtual reality world, and what our internet would eventually become. The metaverse is 1.5 times the size of Earth, a place where you can buy property and construct virtual metropolises. Most of the action takes place on the street, a gigantic highway spanning the circumference of the globe, and its surrounding area is the most coveted real estate in the metaverse. Here, people can represent themselves with avatars of any kind, so long as they're human-sized. And the entire thing is monetized, with purchasable real estate, microtransactions, and premium avatars. America has become divided, and the economy has inflated into ruin. The federal government has all but ceased to exist, and instead, a stateless form of anarchistic capitalism rules everything. Money is now exchanged by the quadrillions. A notorious computer virus known as Snow Crash is making the rounds. Only programmers and computer experts who understand its hidden code are afflicted by it. Through that interface, it can hospitalize them in real life, leaving nothing but static on their VR goggles. Hero becomes entangled with a dark conspiracy. Someone behind the Snow Crash virus is trying to play God and is manipulating the populace to some malevolent end.
Wait a minute, Juanita. Make up your mind. This Snow Crash thing, is it a virus, a drug, or a religion? Juanita shrugs. What's the difference? How can you say that? You're a religious person yourself. All people have religions. It's like we have religion receptors built into our brain cells or something, and we'll latch onto anything that'll fill that niche for us. Now, religion used to be essentially viral, a piece of information that replicated inside the human mind, jumping from one person to the next. That's the way it used to be, and unfortunately, that's the way it's headed right now.
The novel asserts that the human mind works like an operating system, but not written in a computer language like assembly or C++, but in Sumerian. This means that Snow Crash only affects those fluent in this archaic language, a common point of complaint shared by some critics. Imagine if only cybersecurity experts could get their computers infected with Trojans. A crucial detail to the plot, as it adds a sense of deliberation and purpose to Snow Crash. This wasn't a weapon of chaos. It was a tool to enact a very specific plan. Snow Crash proposed many concepts that our reality later reflected. The metaverse proved to be quite similar to future online games such as Ultima Online and EverQuest, as well as virtual chat hubs like Second Life. This is common in researched science fiction. Stevenson majored in physics and geography so he could gain access to the university's computer mainframe. Unlike William Gibson, he attempted computer realism, rather than a more poetic usage of terminology. To his credit, Stevenson's educated guesses got a lot right about the future.
Science fiction inspires people to choose science and engineering as careers. This much is undoubtedly true and somewhat obvious. Good science fiction supplies a plausible, fully thought-out picture of an alternate reality in which some sort of compelling innovation has taken place. A good science fiction universe has a coherence and internal logic that makes sense to scientists and engineers. Examples include Isaac Asimov's robots, Robert Heinlein's rocket ships, and William Gibson's cyberspace. As Jim Carcanius of Microsoft Research puts it, such icons serve as hieroglyphs, simple, recognizable symbols on whose significance everyone agrees. Neal Stephenson.
Stephenson predicted the meteoric rise of laptop computers and cell phones, which at the time were bulky and rare. Some Silicon Valley engineers even admitted that Snow Crash's Earth program inspired Google Earth. Both used satellite imagery, user-uploaded photos, and had a 3D street view. The seeds of the metaverse were already planted by 1992. With games such as Habitat and Neverwinter Nights, you could select your own avatar and explore online worlds. Before the digital age, avatar was a term used sparingly, given it's a Sanskrit word meaning an incarnation of a god. Stevenson helped popularize its use as a name for one's digital personification on the web and in online games. The metaverse also directly inspired many titles, such as A Mercenary and Second Life. Stevenson's vision of online gaming encouraged those who sought to bring it to life. Inspired by Snow Crash, a former Microsoft engineer joined id Software to help pioneer online gaming by co-creating Quake World. Its blisteringly fast deathmatches quickly paved the way for future online games. Quake conventions, tournaments, and an enthusiastic community directly led to the flourishing esports industry we enjoy today. Snow Crash's vivid imagination of the virtual lifestyle even influenced entire online platforms. An Xbox Live project lead made it mandatory reading for his team, and attributes about half his decisions about the platform's design directly to the book. Perhaps Stevenson's most insightful observation is about memetics and how the internet can rapidly propagate flawed ideas across individuals. It doesn't matter how factual, rational, or meaningful an idea is, its spread is only determined by its infectious and emotional appeal. Now the internet's free dissemination of information allows conspiracies, new religions, and widely accepted untruths to proliferate at fiber optic speeds.
We are all susceptible to the pull of viral ideas, like mass hysteria, or a tune that gets into your head that you keep on humming all day until you spread it to someone else. Jokes, urban legends, crackpot religions, Marxism. No matter how smart we get, there is always this deep, irrational part that makes us potential hosts for self-replicating information.
In the decade following William Gibson's acclaimed Sprawl trilogy, he wrote another series set in the decrepit San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge area in the aftermath of a devastating earthquake. They are all somewhat disconnected stories with a shared universe and timeline. The first in the series, Virtual Light, follows the story of a bike messenger who steals a pair of glasses from a rude customer out of spite. Obliviously, her petty crime would lead to a vast conspiracy. Now cops, corporate henchmen, and a hitman are all in hot pursuit to reclaim her unlikely prize.
Here, check it out. He put them on her. She was facing the city when he did it. Financial district, the hills behind that. These towers blooming there. Buildings bigger than anything. A stone regular grid of them, marching in from the hills. Then Chinese writing filled the sky. Sammy. She felt him grab her as she lost her balance. The Chinese writing twisted into English. Sunflower Corporation. Anything she focused on, another label hit the sky. Dense patches of technical words she didn't understand.
They were a pair of virtual light glasses containing the plans for a complete transformation of the city using nanotechnology. Priceless and dangerous to keep around, but it was too late to undo her mistake. The client turns up dead. The bloodhounds were on her trail, and they would take no prisoners. VL technology is similar to augmented reality hardware like Microsoft's HoloLens, but instead of projecting light onto transparent lenses, VL transmits images and sensations to our eyes directly, without the use of photon particles. This tech was based on a real-life hypothesis by scientist Stephen Beck. Gibson's style and colorful characterization of the future were unparalleled. His biting satire includes the sensationalist reality TV show Cops in Trouble, a porn star suspiciously similar to a contemporary pop diva, and the church's demonization of virtual reality. In classic cyberpunk style, the upper class of society maintains power and influence, while the lower class has to fight over the scraps. The story instills a deep sense of paranoia. No one can be trusted, and no one is beyond reproach. The second book in the Bridge trilogy is Idaru, a cyber detective novel about Colin Laney, a data miner, and his investigation of a rock star who vows to marry a virtual hologram pop idol. The book gives an insight into Japan, its unique lifestyles, and the culture shock foreigners experience while visiting there. The novel explores the concept of nodal points, fault lines among masses of data which mark the divergence in the course of history or in the lives of individuals. When his techniques prove to be reliable, Laney becomes a sought-after asset with his unique nodal approach in analyzing data and predicting future events.
What are the nodal points? Laney looked at the bubbles on the surface of his beer. It's like seeing things in clouds, Laney said, except the things you see are really there. She put her sake down. Yamazaki promised me you weren't crazy. It's not crazy. It's something to do with how I process low-level broad-spectrum input. Something to do with pattern recognition. And SlithScan hired you on the basis of that? They hired me when I demonstrated that it works. But I can't do that with the kind of data you showed me today.
Gibson has identified Laney's methods as a metaphor for how he taps into the shifting trends of society in his own writing. Marrying a virtual AI would have been ludicrous in 1996, but since the book's publishing, this has indeed happened in real-life Japan, strengthening the aura of foresight already present in Gibson's writing. Life imitating art. Virtual Light and Idaru's characters were woven together to form a new plot in the final book of the trilogy. All Tomorrow's Parties follows the Netrunner from the previous book, Laney. It's set in the broken cityscape of the Bridge area. We see what's left of post-millennial San Francisco, serenaded by the death throes of a once prosperous society, with a hint of impending oblivion lingering underneath every sentence. Laney's obsessed with preventing a significant event that may change the course of history, as predicted in a new nodal point. This book illustrates a common take on Gibson's work, that it's more about the texture than the plot, the dismal and beautiful world, the vivid characters, and the concepts he explores.
Laney reaches up and removes the bulky, old-fashioned iPhones. Yamazaki cannot see what outputs to them, but the shifting light from the display reveals Laney's hollowed eyes. It's all going to change, Yamazaki. We're coming up on the mother of all nodal points. I can see it now. It's all going to change. I don't understand. Know what the joke is? It didn't change when they thought it would. Millennium was a Christian holiday. I've been looking at history, Yamazaki. I can see the nodal points in history. Last time we had one like this was 1911. What happened in 1911? Everything changed.
Along with the influx of cyberpunk literature, an explosion of comic books and animation was on the rise. It ranged from rebooted, traditional comic book heroes to refreshingly new stories about futurist metropolises. Transmetropolitan follows a gonzo journalist in a transhumanist society. After retiring into the mountains, one last job pulls him back into the crowded, dystopian city he tried to escape. Spider Jerusalem is a subversive journalist and a fearless fighter for truth, despite having more than a few screws loose. He has run-ins with punks, colorful city denizens, corrupt cops, and has a penchant for resisting authority. Bloody, brutal, and unapologetic, the series is an unflinching look at the dregs of society. Spider has strong words for anyone, from prostitutes to priests to presidents. The comics chronicle the eccentric journo's zany exploits, while he scrambles to fulfill his overdue publishing contract. Transmetropolitan is a ride through an exaggeration of the human condition, unlike anything else. It's a vivid depiction of city life through a warped and colorful lens. Both Marvel and DC Comics would spin off their most famous series with a dark future setting, tapping into the circuits and sprawling cityscapes we had on the brain. Marvel 2099 saw Ghost Rider, Spider-Man, the X-Men, and others face off against a corporocratic world. North America has fallen into the hands of megacorporations such as Alchemax, who rule the dystopian police force, the Public Eye. Here, Ghost Rider is an entity pulled from cyberspace into an android body in his quest to bring down the Demonix Corporation. Spider-Man is transformed into a mutant superhuman through a DNA rewriting machine. And the X-Men fight against a sinister plot to assimilate all life on Earth into techno-organic beings, and only mutants like them are resilient to this malady. At the end of the millennium, one of DC Comics' most popular spin-offs debuted. Batman Beyond follows Bruce Wayne in his twilight years, having long retired from his role as the Dark Knight. Fate leads him to mentor and train Terry McGinnis, a young protege, to use his high-tech Batman gear to bring back justice and peace to Neo Gotham. Terry teams up with hacker Max Gibson and other allies, seeking to cure the criminal scourge that has festered for too long in their city. The animated series is set in the cyber age of 2039, with cyborg eco-terrorists, dangerous psychokinetics, and the descendants of Batman's old enemies. The series illuminates the fractured life of a former caped hero, and with its fresh cyberpunk setting, was hailed as one of the most inspired comic spin-offs. MTV debuted an original, experimental series in 1991 known as Aeon Flux, created by Peter Chung. Its unconventional style seemed to break every rule that animated series adhere to, and soon attracted a cult following. The first 2 seasons had no dialogue, and each episode would end in the protagonist's untimely and gruesome death, often instigated by frivolous accidents, like stepping on a nail or spilling some coffee. Season 3 added dialogue and made it into longer 22-minute episodes, and was reimagined as a more serialized, coherent story. In a totalitarian society with citizens both mundane and incomprehensibly strange, the series often pits Trevor Goodchild, the self-appointed leader of the society, against a Monacan spy, Eon. At first glance, they seem to be archenemies, but their paths entwine in combat, intrigue, partnership, and occasionally lust, like the yin and yang of a morbidly beautiful alien world. The show proudly wears its striking art style, heavily inspired by French comics such as the work of Moebius. It's also an incredibly fetishistic and sexually charged portrayal of sci-fi espionage like no other. While often bewildering, Aeon Flux is an acid trip through a cyberpunk-inspired world we would never forget. Chung's imagination knew no bounds. From bizarre, creative implementations of cybernetically enhanced limbs and body parts, either for functionality, tactical use, or for sensual deviancy. Aeon Flux is shocking, bordering on pornographic at times, but it's also an inexplicable adventure that would push the boundaries of animated storytelling in the West to its breaking point. Despite its relatively short series run, it still holds a special place in many a fan's heart.
That which does not kill us makes us stranger.
And in 1990, we saw the first really coherent attempt to demonize the computer underground, to really cook them up as a national threat and just essentially to break their backs. And it almost worked. I mean, it got a lot of awful publicity. You know, punks with computers were very painstakingly vilified by, people in positions of authority. And there was quite an extensive media campaign to, paint them up as a considerable threat.
Science fiction projects present-day conditions into the future to enlighten us. If you cannot dream it, you could never build it. And the world of hacking perfectly demonstrates this ebb and flow of sci-fi and reality. Cyberpunk writers dreamed of what the denizens of cyberspace would be capable of, and how the authorities, big corps, and governments would crack down on those freedoms when their power was threatened. Hence, hackers and cyberpunk were born connected. hacking has been around longer than most people realize. The precursors to modern hackers, known as phreakers, a contraction of phone and freak, first gained notoriety in the 1970s. The earliest phreakers were curious folks who experimented with telephones. They learned how to redirect calls and manipulate phone lines by mimicking the tones used by the phone systems. Since long-distance calls were expensive, phreakers developed rudimentary techniques to circumvent these fees. Some went above and beyond, like illegally tapping into telecommunication systems and stealing data. This led to a crackdown on phreakers and hackers in the mid-80s.
Nidor fell afoul of the Bell South Corporation because some Confederates, acquaintances of his, had lifted some documents from a Bell South computer, and it was put about that they had attacked the police 911 emergency dialing system. And of course, this would have constituted a very serious crime, and you can imagine that the police looked with great disfavor on the prospect of a hacker attack on their own private phone systems. But it turned out that this was essentially a scare tactic. This purported threat was a complete phantom. The 911 system was never in any actual danger. So a quite large show trial was cooked up, and it went on, and it just collapsed in total ignominy. And represented a serious setback for the forces of cybernetic order.
Phrack is the world's longest-running hacker e-zine that got early cyberpunks connected in both their message and spirit. In its early days in the 80s, it was accessed through a bulletin board system via phone lines. A year after the e-zine debuted, cyber denizens wrote the Hacker Manifesto, and infamous groups like the Legion of Doom began to make headlines. The Internet revolution took off in 1989, the year the World Wide Web was invented. With the first official web browser releasing a year later, the Internet as we know it spread like wildfire. The middle of the decade saw the industry experience its greatest boom in computer technology. Amazon, eBay, Yahoo, Google, and Hotmail were all founded within a few years of each other. In 1995, Microsoft launched Windows 95, a powerful and accessible new door to personal computing. In the 5 years that followed, we went from 40 million to 400 million internet users. It was a technological milestone in history. This resonating enthusiasm for computing caught the entertainment industry's attention. We saw a shift of focus from seemingly unattainable cybernetics and hardware, like in previous media, toward a more realistic portrayal of software, hacking, and virtual reality. More computer users meant new opportunities, but fresh faces meant new risks. The concept of the feds and hackers battling it out in cyberspace was no longer science fiction. It was quickly becoming a reality. The world was feverishly grasping for more technology. We went from cassette tapes to CDs to digital MP3 music in only a dozen years. Hacker culture also developed rapidly, inspiring anything from the low-level script kiddies all the way up to notorious black hats. Even amateur computer enthusiasts eagerly adopted the term hacker due to its unmistakable cool factor. And where there is hacking, there's piracy. The 90s would see rampant anti-piracy PSAs, just like the drug PSAs from the decade before. Illegally downloading cracked software, music, movies, or TV shows from the internet using peer-to-peer services like Napster, LimeWire, or Kazaa was quickly becoming vogue. The ability to copy digitally pirated goods indefinitely fostered the perception that copyrighted material was free for everyone. Corporations began to suffer losses, and even music labels and rock bands fought back in the courts, such as the landmark Metallica v. Napster case in the year 2000. As years went on, the infamous Piracy It's a Crime PSA would run before hundreds of movies. It used an edgy presentation to equate downloading a movie with stealing a car, encapsulating the overblown anti-hacker rhetoric of the time. Anonymity allowed online culture to thrive. Authorities couldn't completely lock it down, and that convinced users that they were untouchable. It was the Wired West, and the cowboys of cyberspace loved every second.
Identity had been forever changed by the internet, Formerly, it had meant who you really are, but now it meant any one of a number of persistent faces that you can present to the digital universe. Neil Stephenson.
Cyberpunk author Bruce Sterling penned The Hacker Crackdown in 1992, which highlighted a number of FBI and US Secret Service raids, arrests, and operations aimed at hackers. It marked a paradigm shift when law enforcement got deadly serious about cybercrime. Hackers young and old heard the feds banging at their door the country over. From harmless pranks to hacking into government servers, these cyber trespassers would face any challenge. Whether it was for fun, for clout, or for malicious purposes, these daredevil acts now had serious consequences. After being on the run from the FBI for years, Kevin Mitnick was arrested for hacking and telecommunications fraud. Around this time, the taunt, "My kung fu is stronger than yours," would quickly become a hacker catchphrase. Like many former black hats, he would go on to become a cybersecurity expert after his release. Teenage hacker Sean Parker was tracked down by the FBI over cybercrimes against a Fortune 500 company. He later co-founded Napster and helped build Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg. The Secret Service even raided a tabletop game developer working on GURPS Cyberpunk, seizing computers, manuscripts, and discs. Steve Jackson Games eventually won the case, leading to an end of these questionable anti-hacker operations. Crazy stories like these, seemingly ripped straight from sci-fi novels, sowed the seeds that would take the entertainment industry by storm. Outlandish cyberspace would give way to films mirroring real-life hackers on the World Wide Web. The same year Sterling's book was published, Sneakers released, a genuine look into penetration testing, hacking, and social engineering. The movie follows a ragtag group of hackers, freakers, technicians, and security experts. Their world is turned upside down when one of their jobs lands a black box in their laps. It turns out to be the most advanced codebreaker ever made, and its untold power is too dangerous for anyone to be entrusted with.
Anybody want to crash a couple of passenger jets?
I said, turn it off. Turn it off!
Nothing was beyond its reach, from airline jets to nuclear codes, and that lands the group into the crosshairs of the most dangerous people in the world. Despite the MacGuffin's concept being more fantastic than realistic, Sneakers applies several practical hacking techniques. Phreaking is used to obscure the group's location while calling the NSA. Common tactics like rummaging through trash for private information and using social engineering to bypass security are also demonstrated in detail. It remains one of the earlier Hollywood films to capture hacking with a level of practicality. 1995 could be dubbed the year of the hacker. Famous cybercriminals were arrested, and 3 big-budget hacking movies were released back-to-back: The Net, Hackers, and Johnny Mnemonic. The Net is a glimpse into the technology-obsessed 1990s, when modem, PC, and computer server technology seemed boundless. It explores the personal, political, and corporate dangers of the wired world. This cyber thriller shows off infectious malware that can compromise your computer by clicking a link or loading up a suspicious disk. And medical records can be falsified, leaving you to believe that you have a terminal illness. Even your prescriptions can be altered, making your next trip to the pharmacy your last. The film's opening wowed audiences with the now mundane activity of ordering a pizza online. Sandra Bullock's character is a shut-in computer nerd who only socializes online through chat and email. Unconventional at the time, this is now all too common with computer enthusiasts.
Computers your life, aren't they?
Yes. Perfect hiding place.
What's your speciality in computers?
Beta testing mostly, but pretty much anything. Just go into people's systems, you find their faults, and you fix it, that's all.
What happens if they don't have any faults?
Don't believe I've met one yet.
The film helped drive the awe, fear, and uncertainty of computers to a fever pitch. Whether this was all feasible in the 1990s was irrelevant. The Net was a perfect diorama of where our heads were at toward the end of the millennium. Hackers gave us is a much more bombastic look at cyberculture. The movie aimed to bedazzle its young audience with techno music, rollerblading, and actors chewing through every scene. Superficially inspired by real-life hacking, the movie leaned heavily on technobabble and computer graphic visualizations. It took real terminology and threw it in a blender. The story begins with a young boy being arrested for crashing over 1,500 computers, causing a dip in the stock exchange. The former child hacker, now a high schooler, immediately reboots his hacking career after his probation from using computers expires. He hacks into a local TV station under his new moniker, Crash Override, but is blocked by a rival hacker. Some stiff competition has formed since he's been out of the game. Crash bumps into a coterie of local hackers at his new school. As a rite of passage, one of its newer members hacks into the mainframe of an energy corporation dubbed the Gibson, and gets backtraced and arrested by the feds. They realize something larger is at stake, as their hacker friends are arrested and charged for crimes they didn't commit.
Hack the planet! Hack the planet!
Shut up and get in the car! The hackers uncover evidence that somebody's embezzling money on a massive scale, which could cost the company millions. The Plague, a cybersecurity officer by day, hacker by night, notices this emerging group of cyber thieves and accuses them of planting a virus called Da Vinci, a nod to the infamous, real-life Michelangelo virus. The Da Vinci virus has infected several oil tankers, and unless its creator's demands are met, the tankers will topple. What follows is a battle between the teenage cyberpunks versus the Corpos, now teamed up with the Secret Service. They're cracking down Crash's crew, aiming to lock them up for the rest of the foreseeable future.
This is our world now. The world of the electron and the switch, the beauty of the bond. We exist without nationality, skin color, or religious bias. You wage wars, murder, cheat, lie to us and try to make us believe it's for our own good, yet we're the criminals. Yes, I am a criminal. My crime is that of curiosity. I am a hacker, and this is my manifesto. You may stop me, but you can't stop us all.
The film helped popularize a variation of the Hacker Manifesto. Hackers brazenly paints corporations and federal officers as the bad guys, and hackers as heroic, whose only crime is curiosity. It demonstrates little actual hacking, presuming its audience's disinterest in realism. We also see few consequences of cybercrime. Instead, the movie uses MTV-style quick cuts and Tron-like computer visuals to portray a sexy fantasy of cyberculture. Despite inaccuracies, even real-life hackers still enjoy the movie as a guilty pleasure, if a bit fuzzy on the details. As technical consultant Nicholas Jarecki put it,
"For all its exaggerations, it does a decent job of showing the hacker spirit. Those kids were tinkerers, experimenting, reveling in their ability to figure something out. It's a celebration of human ingenuity."
Despite its widespread acclaim and sales, William Gibson's classic novel Neuromancer was having trouble making its way to the silver screen. It was stuck in development hell for decades, despite director interest and several pitches. Instead, Gibson's earlier work, Johnny Mnemonic, was adapted in 1995. What started as an indie art house project exploded into a $30 million pitch to Sony Pictures, fueled by the boom of computer technology. When Gibson himself wrote the screenplay, he had to adapt the 22-page short story into a feature-length film, essentially inventing 80% of the plot from scratch. Johnny Mnemonic follows the life of a data smuggler who gave up his childhood memories years ago for a head implant. This effectively turned his brain into a portable hard drive for discrete clients. This idea mirrors the real-life sneakernet, where people transport data storage by foot. But unlike the floppy disks or CDs of the 90s, Johnny can carry a whopping 80 gigabytes in his head, over 50 times the capacity of an average hard drive in 1995. Many may think of Gibson as a technophile, but even he admits that was never true. He wrote his early works on a typewriter and gradually switched to the Apple II, then to consumer-friendly MacBooks and iPads. When he modernized Johnny Mnemonic for the big screen, he had to brush up his knowledge of computer technology.
I was actually able to write Neuromancer because I didn't know anything about computers. I knew literally nothing. What I did was deconstruct the poetics of the language of people who were already working in the field. I'd stand in the hotel bar at the Seattle Science Fiction Convention listening to these guys who were the first computer programmers I ever saw talk about their work. I had no idea what they were talking about, but that was the first time that I ever heard the word interface used as a verb. And I swooned. Wow, that's a verb. Seriously, poetically, that was wonderful. So I was listening to it as an English honors student. I would take it back out, deconstruct it poetically, and build a world from those bricks.
The movie updates 1980s technobabble like cyberspace to real-world terms like the internet. Johnny Mnemonic shows off surfing the internet in VR, cybernetically augmented limbs, and the villain even brandishes a monomolecular wire implant, which cuts through flesh, steel, and stone like a deadly laser whip. Actor Keanu Reeves portrays the titular character in his first of many roles in cyberpunk movies and games. A routine data running job hits a snag when Johnny's frantic and inexperienced clients ask him to download a massive 320 gigabyte package, far beyond the maximum he can safely store in his implant. Exceeding this limit will eventually kill him if not extracted quickly. Johnny reluctantly agrees right before his clients are brutally assassinated by the Yakuza. Going from bad to worse, what follows is a high-tension chase as cutthroat corporations, the relentless Yakuza, street gangs, and artificial intelligence, and even a cyborg preacher assassin all want the secrets contained in Johnny's head. Slowly dying and unable to unload the data, Johnny is on the run. As customary, he doesn't know what he's carrying, but it quickly becomes apparent that if it gets into the right hands, it could change the world.
It's NAS, right?
Yeah, the black shakes. Like half the people on the planet. You don't get this shit from amp jobs, that's just a myth.
So what does cause it?
The world causes it. This causes it. This causes it. Information overload. All the electronics around you poisoning the airwaves. But we still have all this shit, because we can't live without it.
The crisis of modern society is the Black Shakes pandemic, which causes extensive neurological damage and violent seizures. The street doctors claim that signal pollution is the culprit. Human bodies are getting overloaded with digital waves, and they just can't take it. All-out riots and unrest break out between those most affected by this affliction and the elites, who can live their lives in luxury and health. Johnny Mnemonic is a cyberpunk story through and through, as penned by one of the genre's best. It hits all the right beats, scouring cyberspace, touring us through the high-rise hotels of Beijing, and the shanty fortresses of Newark, reminiscent of the decrepit bridge city that debuted in Virtual Light. The movie was bold and ambitious, dwarfing any project Gibson or the director had done before. In fact, all the moving parts, production companies, studios, and busy work became overwhelming, according to reports. The movie gets lost in its wide variety of wacky ideas and flaunts its absurdity on its sleeve. This makes it difficult to take seriously at times, but there's still a lot to love in Johnny Mnemonic. It's old-school cyberpunk, beloved by many due to its earnest visualization of Gibson's world.
Hit me.
A live-action video game was designed as a companion piece to the movie. The game was essentially an interactive film with clickable regions placed over live-action footage. It's a product of the FMV or full motion video era, where ambitious devs tried to blur the line between cinema and games. With a completely separate cast of actors and a tenth of the budget, the game tries to capture the suspense of being a walking hard drive in a cyberpunk world, though the production values and writing differ significantly from the film. Sadly, the second film adaptation of Gibson's work lacked the impact or production value of the first. It netted some great acting talent with Christopher Walken and Willem Dafoe, but its slim budget, scarcity of footage, and disjointed editing made for a muddled experience. New Rose Hotel feels like a movie made in the editing room. It was also based on an Omni magazine short story, but one only half the length of Johnny Mnemonic. The film is a patchwork of disconnected scenes spliced with stock footage and B-roll, with an art house, grungy style of editing. The story is about two American headhunters using a Shinjuku girl to lure Hiroshi, a brilliant engineer, away from his current position toward a rival corporation. They promise this small-time call girl an early retirement for the job, and the headhunters will walk away with a cool $100 million. But in the cutthroat world of corporate warfare, things aren't always as they appear. After a slow but competent setup with a promising premise, it's apparent that not enough footage was available to complete the movie. Blatantly reused scenes, cheap sets, and lazy visual effects made for a science fiction thriller without the sci-fi or the thrills. Its limited release and dismal box office returns of about $20,000 essentially sealed the fate of future Gibson adaptations. Neuromancer would remain in development hell, and no big-budget film adaptation of his work would see the light of day for over 20 years. Japanese animated features embraced hacker culture as well. Anime was diversifying in the 1990s, from Cowboy Bebop to Neon Genesis Evangelion, from Ghost in the Shell to Serial Experiments Lain. The latter, as the title suggests, was highly experimental. There are frequent title cards, almost like a silent film, strewn throughout the anime. Metaphorical visuals and a fractured narrative challenge viewers to decode the storyline's true nature. Enter Lane Iwakura, a seemingly unexceptional schoolgirl who dives into a web of cyberculture, deceit, mystery, and transhumanism. Her entire school is receiving emails that send chills down their spines. These messages are from a classmate who ended her life a week before. Who is sending them, and why did she kill herself? And what connection does Lane have to this victim? Lane becomes obsessed with The Wired, an online system similar to our internet, which hosts your typical online chats, but also has reality warping VR, which tantalizes the characters in the show. Students hear whispers of those who have renounced all things physical, who now exist solely as pure code, worshipped as gods of the Wired by a devoted user base. As her world begins to unravel, Lane experiences lapses in time. As she delves deeper into the Wired, her life, friends, and social activities fade away. She has waking nightmares, drug-like hallucinations of blood and paranoia, haunting visions of ever-changing faces, and men in black, lurking behind corners. Lane often hangs out at a hacker den nightclub called Siberia, a likely nod to Douglas Rushkoff's book about early internet culture. At the club, an anti-Wired terrorist commits a brutal murder right in front of Lane and her friends, suggesting there's more to this online world than it appears. Some cite that Serial Experiments Lain was inspired in part by the 8-circuit model of consciousness proposed by Dr. Timothy Leary, a hypothesis that compares human drives, the brain, and bodily functions to computer circuits. Leary was infamous for his controversial ideas, his love of LSD, and his connections to science fiction writers such as Gibson. The show is remarkably atmospheric, with long sequences where you can hear only the hums and whines of power lines that sprawl over the city like a prison of wires, threatening to envelop its inhabitants. Predictive for 1998, the series notes how internet-driven obsession and addiction could affect its users. It also speaks to the complete transplantation of the consciousness from the flesh to the digital world entirely, in a relatable and chilling setting.
I belong to a new underclass, no longer determined by social status or the color of your skin. No, we now have discrimination down to a science.
We would also see creative works explore the idea of hacking biology instead of circuitry. As designer baby studies became more prominent in the 90s, Truman Show screenwriter Andrew Niccol wrote and directed a profound biopunk film that explores the evolution of prejudice, genetic inequality, and the human spirit. Biopunk is often defined as an offshoot of cyberpunk, but instead of dealing with cybernetics, it focuses on synthetic organics, biotechnology, DNA manipulation, and their effects on society. Gattaca is a 1997 film about Vincent Freeman, a natural-born man who was conceived without genetic intervention. During his birth, it's declared that he has a degenerative heart condition that would kill him in his 30s. Nearsighted, imperfect, and frail, he is an invalid, unfit for higher positions in a world that now discriminates by genes. Exclusive clubs, employers, and even the dating pool now discriminate on the basis of your DNA. Vincent is always playing second fiddle to his younger brother, who had his genes perfected before birth. Taller, stronger, healthier, and able to achieve the things that Vincent could never hope to. His one goal is to join Gattaca Aerospace Corporation and take part in the upcoming mission to Titan, but he's hit his employment ceiling as a janitor. Desperate, he becomes a borrowed ladder, someone who buys DNA samples from a valid, skin, blood, urine, and hair, in order to pose as a genetically qualified candidate. Bypassing biometric scanners, screenings, and blood tests, he's escaping his predestined social class. Vincent's donor is a perfect specimen, a former athlete whose career was ended in a tragic accident, and is now a self-loathing paralytic who could use the money a Gattaca employee could pay. Vincent's routine of painstakingly cleaning his person and workspace of any traces of DNA borders on paranoia. He also plants fake samples of hair and skin to further throw off inspectors. But when a brutal murder occurs at his workplace, everything could come crashing down. The Hoovers start collecting DNA evidence from all over Gattaca and interrogate those with a motive to kill or secrets to hide. Their nickname is Wordplay, a combo of the notorious FBI director and the vacuum cleaner brand. Part future noir, part dystopian drama, Gattaca examines a world where eugenics is king, and merit is an afterthought. James Hughes would later criticize Gattaca in his book Citizen Cyborg for fear-mongering about legitimate health requirements for astronauts. And 11 years after Gattaca released, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008 regulated testing and discrimination based on genetics, as the film predicted would happen on paper. But as Gattaca's opening monologue warned,
My father was right. It didn't matter how much I lied on my resume. My real resume was in my cells. Of course, it's illegal to discriminate. Genoism, it's called. But no one takes the laws seriously.
Despite its grim and sobering themes, the film also evokes an inspirational message. There is no gene for the human spirit. Hacking the human body must have been on our collective minds, as it was practiced in science, shown in films, and even explored in video games. A few in particular dabbled in the unsettling solitude of space, with a dash of cyberpunk tech and biological horror, where unimaginable depravity and unethical experiments could go unrestrained. One example was Bioforge, a cold and brutal science fiction story, which sees your carcass pulled from space wreckage and transformed into a cybernetic monstrosity. You are just as desperate to escape this off-world prison as you are to punish those who created you. You'll give guards, scientists, and other inmates the beatdown, all while evading deadly experiments and security systems that permeate the facility's hallways. Passwords, hints, and solutions are hidden deep within lengthy data logs and computer terminals. Some scenarios involve remote-controlled robots or gun turrets, while others have time limits, where one false step can be your last. It's a well-made, if unforgiving, adventure horror experience. In a dark twist, Your own character is in many ways the source of the terror, as faculty shriek in fear while a monster of flesh and steel pulverizes them mercilessly.
You have stolen my body and my mind. I will know why, or I will have your blood.
BioForge's focus on body horror and cybernetic decay thematically mirrors another great cyberpunk game from the year before, System Shock.
New Atlanta, Sector 11, Building 71G. 7 April 2072. 11:13 p.m. Hacker begins unauthorized entry into the Tri-Optimum corporate network.
Created by the founders of the immersive sim, Looking Glass Studios, the game offers environmental interactivity and dynamic scenarios with many ways to complete them, allowing for diverse playstyles. In the year 2072, you play a hacker who gets busted while breaking into Tri-Optimum's off-world Citadel station. One of its executives makes you a deal: hack the station's central AI, Shodan, and remove its ethical constraints. In exchange, you'll get a military-grade neural implant installed while you're under a 6-month coma.
Welcome to the throne of God, mortal.
You awaken to learn that Shodan reprogrammed the androids on board to be hostile, and the crew have either been murdered or have been mutated into twisted husks, who now worship their newfound dark goddess. Your only goal is to undo the atrocities you inadvertently released and escape this technological house of horror. System Shock is an action-adventure game that takes immersion to intimidating new levels. You can dodge, lean, crouch, and attack in a complex and daunting control scheme. You're able to manipulate tons of objects and equipment, and even tweak your laser weapon's power settings. System Shock's hacking sequences let you soar around in 3D cyberspace, hacking nodes and avoiding ice to break into security systems. This was one of the most immersive attempts to date at simulating a Decker flying through cyberspace. The game also featured VR support, long before virtual reality headsets were common. Though primitive by today's standards, it was a peek into the potential that this tech could one day offer. The antagonist, Shodan, is chilling and memorable. She has the distorted, glitchy voice of a corrupted AI. Spine-tingling sound design made for an ominous setting, painstakingly created by RPG veterans and sound engineers, many of whom also performed together in the alternative rock band Tribe. System Shock paved the way for some of the most interactive and immersive video game experiences, like Thief, Deus Ex, and BioShock. The game is also fondly remembered for introducing one of the most memorable and haunting villains in gaming history.
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors. How can you challenge a perfect, immortal machine?
System Shock 2 was an improvement in almost every respect. The sequel used the engine developed for Thief the Dark Project. 5 years of technological progress brought fully 3D modeled graphics, better gun handling, and improved stealth gameplay. System Shock 2 is more graphic and terrifying than the original. The story is set 42 years after the first game, aboard the Von Braun, the most advanced, faster-than-light spacecraft ever made, during its maiden voyage into deep space. But when you wake from cryosleep, you find the once pristine, cutting-edge ship in tatters. The crew is mostly dead, missing, or worse, turned into disturbing hybrids of human, mutant, and machine. You'll shudder as you hear them talking amongst themselves, lurking around corners, and sneaking up on you when you least expect it.
Be right under my nose. Come out. Come out. Come out.
Working with the remaining crew via radio, you'll navigate dangerous corridors, threatened by a corrupted artificial intelligence and the grotesque abominations that have infected the ship, known only as the Many. Haunted by audio logs left behind by deceased crew members, radio transmissions, and unnerving telepathic voices, this creates a threatening and uneasy atmosphere. You're also hearing whispers of the return of an old familiar enemy, the corrupted AI known as Shodan. After the tutorial, you can emulate your career path, such as off-world mining, military training, and life choices. These provide stat bonuses for your character. The sequel borrows more traditional RPG mechanics like progression and skill points. Completing objectives grants you cybernetic modules which you can allocate toward guns, hacking, psionics, and other paths. 3 character classes are now available. Shooting is inaccurate unless you improve your gun handling. Weapons need maintenance, can be modified, and some items have a skill requisite. Hacking has been replaced with the simple strategy minigame with stat bonuses, instead of the 3D cyberspace of the first game. It allows you to bypass security cameras, turrets, and robots, and you can unlock containers and keypads to get extra loot or open up new pathways aboard the Von Braun. The System Shock series lovingly embraces cyberpunk tropes. Ice picks bypass security systems, you can augment yourself with cybernetic implants, and a rogue artificial intelligence is a threat that looms over everything. Psionics have a slow start, but become formidable later on. They use psi points to channel mental energy by using an amplifier. You can temporarily enhance skills, burn or freeze enemies, lift objects using telekinesis, or even hack the minds of opponents. System Shock 2 continues the series' legacy of engrossing sound design.
They've cut off the central elevator. What's going on? Last night I had the strangest dream. I was in my room by myself, but all of a sudden there was not just me there, but 100 me's, 1,000 me's. The strange thing was, it felt good. I felt like I was part of something, like I belong. I hope I have the same dream tonight.
One of the pioneers of pre-recorded audio logs you can listen to while playing, these expand on the story and setting, and the events preceding your awakening from cryo. Atmospheric audio loops and music bring the world to life. The unmistakable hum and whir of machinery and engines made the environments feel real. Ramin Djawadi, best known for Game of Thrones, co-composed the ambient, electronica, and drum and bass, which makes for intense and engaging sequences. System Shock 2 is widely regarded as one of the most immersive and chilling experiences PC gaming has to offer. In spite of disappointing launch sales, the game has become a cult classic, influencing numerous franchises due to its unique design and player freedom.
With only a few short years of evolution, they've been able to conquer this starship, mankind's mightiest creation. Where were we after 40 years of evolution? What swamp were we swimming around in, single-celled and mindless? What if Shodan's creations are superior to us? What will they become in 1 million years, in 10 million years? What's clear is that Shodan shouldn't be allowed to play God. She's far too good at it.
Cyberpunk has a long musical history, often hearing its themes echoed in electronic, metal, industrial, and new wave genres. The movement owes a lot of its look, sound, energy, and feel to the punk rock and heavy metal scenes. Black leather, metal piercings, wild hairstyles, and a middle finger firmly extended toward authority. Perhaps nothing better encapsulated the classic cyberpunk aesthetic than the world-renowned heavy metal magazine. Its famous covers guest-starred cyborgs, punks walking the ruined city streets, circuits, and cybernetics. Both beautiful and corrupted, inspirational, and even a bit pornographic, the sci-fi visuals in heavy metal were like the pretty streetworker of cyberpunk, contrasting its glamorous neon and chrome with its seedy underbelly. Future authors such as Gibson absorbed this fertile imagery while sculpting their intricate stories, characters, and rich histories. As synthesizers became more prevalent, musicians experimented with new themes, styles, and sounds, imagining our future worlds in audial form. Cyberpunk's musical heart is heard in earlier films which espoused its themes. Brooding synthetic soundscapes permeated the bleak urban vistas of Blade Runner, Escape from New York, and The Terminator, whose style was emulated and imitated for years. Even metal legends Iron Maiden opened their 1986 tour shows with Blade Runner's end credits music, a tribute to the film which inspired their album, Somewhere in Time. German electronic quartet Kraftwerk were synthesizer pioneers of the 1970s. They famously imitated robots on stage, and their lyrics evoked humanity's growing dependence on technology. Simple yet dreamy rhythms and retro-futuristic fashion made for an experience that is still popular today. Inspired by Kraftwerk and the synth sounds of the Moog, Gary Newman evolved from punk rock to become a trailblazer in new wave electronic music. Most known for his upbeat synth-pop hit, Cars, that high-energy sound obscured a darker voice underneath. The same year as his biggest hit, he performed Our Friends Electric, which journeyed us through the morbid experience of android prostitutes. Directly inspired by Philip K. Dick's fiction, especially his seminal work, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, 3 years before it would be adapted to the big screen as Blade Runner. Over the decades, Newman and his musical disciples would evolve the sound into darker, more experimental tones. Nine Inch Nails clutched at the aching, angsty heart of 1990s youth, with their rage-filled, animalistic vocals mixed with computer-bred melodies. Its creator, Trent Reznor, harnessed his background in synthesizers and jazz music, but added mechanical noise and sinister lyrics with his debut album, Pretty Hate Machine. Industrial rock and electronica often embraced nihilism, sounding like the primal drives itching at the back of every person's head, set against the squealing cogs of the great machine of civilization. Head Like a Hole's striking music video shows a mechanical head with gears, rotors, and circuits. A man struggles while hanging, entwined by wires, while Reznor screams about the worship of the almighty dollar and our masochistic urge to accumulate it. Industrial music was quickly becoming the anthem of a mechanized generation. The horror and angst of a biomechanical freak was captured in the music of Japanese composer Shu Ishikawa for the Tetsuo movies. Relentless percussion, synthetic melodies, and a guttural feel. The 80s saw industrial metal bands with music and lyrics that echoed the cyberpunk ethos. Bands like Ministry and Fear Factory proudly waved the banner of anti-authoritarianism and the fear of dehumanization through technology. Ministry was especially aggressive in warning about the new order they saw forming in modern governments, and their message even directly inspired films like Hardware, which featured the grinding, chainsaw-like vocals of their hit Stigmata. Likewise, Fear Factory's work carried strong themes of man versus machine, with songs about police states, the blistered rage of the working man, and a soulless world of people, all disconnected from one another. Meanwhile, Frontline Assembly and Nine Inch Nails brought industrial beats and mind-warping synths that sounded like a melodic factory line. Some of their earlier music videos looked like trailers of cyberpunk movies that never made it to cinemas. Frontline Assembly's music speaks of machines, cybernetics, and resistance against a despotic authority, while Nine Inch Nails' lyrics were debaucherous, shocking, but incredibly human, touching on the uncomfortable topics and bestial urges that drive us all. It was the textbook definition of cybernetics in musical form, man interfacing with machines. These artists produced the soundtrack of a wayward populace, looking for answers in a rapidly transforming world. Industrial music videos often portray vile and uncomfortable visuals from the depths of human depravity, such as the Holocaust, a common inspiration to much of cyberpunk fiction. Big beat maestros, The Prodigy, brought the fearless punk attitude to the loud drum loops and bass lines of dance music. Their chaotic, high-strung sound of the future would find its way into many cyberpunk-themed works, from Hackers to The Matrix. Later in the decade, electronic duo Daft Punk drenched their act in the colorful style of androids, technology, and robotics. They popularized the trend of wearing signature helmets instead of showing their faces. Their lavish costumes and stage performances were heavily inspired by Tron, classic sci-fi films, and Sid Mead's concept artwork. Their patented style featured electronically distorted vocals, often combined with samples of vintage music. Nearly every song was a foot-tapping earworm, and openly explored themes like robots, our obsession with technology, and what it means to be a human being. Even newcomers to cyberpunk culture adopted it as their own. Punk rock legend Billy Idol did a deep dive into internet culture and the sci-fi literature of the 80s. To capture the spirit of the movement, he talked with experts on cyberculture, Usenet groups, and some of the oldest online communities. Neuromancer, movies like The Lawnmower Man, and The Computer Age heavily inspired 1993's Cyberpunk, Billy's experimental comeback album. Considered one of the very first digital multimedia albums, Cyberpunk had a floppy disk with art, lyrics, and other material, and his personal email address inside. The song Shock to the System was released as a single and a music video, which portrayed Billy transforming into a grotesque cyborg, set against urban unrest and a despotic police force, encapsulating the rebellious and angsty heart of the 90s. Though in the eyes of many critics, Idol mainstreamed cyberpunk, claiming he latched onto this cultural phenomenon cynically, rather than through love and understanding. Whether you were tuned into it or not, the cyberpunk movement infected our airwaves. You heard it on your radio, you saw it on your television, and you cheered for it at concerts. Cyberpunk's vision of the future was beginning to resemble reality.
The girl with the gloves and the goggles and her hair being blown back beautifully by the experience she was having under the goggles. VR was like the future that never happened. Like the flying car or the jetpack. Still, I think we will all be living on one side of some very singular stuff one day.
Entertainment and media would herald virtual reality as the way we would interface with computers in the future. Clunky hardware like keyboards and mice seemed like a stepping stone on the path to launching headfirst into cyberspace, just as we had witnessed in the media of the 1980s, such as Tron, Brainstorm, and even The Twilight Zone. As computer graphics technology marched steadily into the millennium, the desire to go beyond flat screens into lifelike 3D worlds by way of virtual reality was growing at a breakneck pace. As the looming threat of the dot-com bubble grew ever closer to bursting, millions were invested in hardware and software companies by those itching to get a slice of that future tech pie. Huge gains were made with real-life VR tech in the late 80s and 90s. Using this technology in first-person experiences and flight sims showed great promise, but it was limited to tech demos with few practical applications. VPL's Data Glove, iPhones, and DataSuit were the first VR products available to consumers, but they didn't catch on with the masses. Unfortunately, the tech just wasn't there yet. None were more disappointed by this than video game giant Nintendo, who jumped onto the VR bandwagon with the Virtual Boy project in 1995. This was their second attempt at breaking the two-dimensional barrier of gaming. Their first attempt was in 1987 with the Famicom 3D system, which used alternating images and active shutter glasses to imitate depth to the human eye. There was a lot of potential with the Virtual Boy's promise of 3D gaming, but too much was sacrificed on the road to a compact, all-in-one console with dual-screen goggles. Red monochrome graphics, neck and eye strain, no motion tracking, and poor game implementation made this pseudo-VR headset defunct within a year of release. We didn't know as much about simulator sickness back then, and the HD screens and refresh rates needed to trick our eyes into believing in these false worlds were simply out of our grasp. However, that didn't stop Hollywood from embracing virtual reality with open arms. VR showed up in films and TV superficially as a flashy, high-tech gimmick. A welcome surprise, but until later in the decade, the concept of virtual reality had not gotten the more serious examination it deserved. Most media put VR into their stories for flavor rather than substance. They often bit off more than their budget or production allowed them to chew. Early CGI and styrofoam props couldn't hold up the grand ideas of Tech War, VR5, and arcade. They have some inspired plots and use video game mechanics to add flair and a ticking clock element, but their special effects and understanding of VR have aged poorly. VR5 was a techno-thriller show made at the height of the VR craze. Sidney Bloom, a tech-savvy fiber optic specialist, invents unique virtual reality gear which can tap into anyone's subconscious at the dial of a phone call. Through shared sessions that only she remembers, Sidney makes new friends and can now speak with her catatonic mother for the first time in years. Each session happens in a snap in real time, but can last for minutes or hours on the inside until Sidney finds the exit key. A bad trip can even land you in a coma, and things turn deadly when she ventures into the mind of a killer by accident. This attracts the attention of the shadowy organizations researching the true potential of this VR phenomenon. VR5 imagines virtual reality as a doorway to another dimension, rather than a human-constructed simulation. So while the show is light on realism, it captures the sense of potential surrounding VR that swooned audiences at the time. Star Trek's first captain, William Shatner, worked with a ghostwriter to create several novels known as the Tech War series in the 80s and 90s. These books imagined a drug-like virtual reality experience, illegally traded via microchips called tech. The story follows a cop who's framed and sentenced to suspended animation for dealing tech. A sudden, early release has got him searching for answers. Star Trek's successful revival show likely boosted Shatner's books into the mainstream, turning into a full transmedia franchise. Comic books, multiple movies, a TV series, and even a first-person shooter tie-in game. Unfortunately, this franchise's ambition overshot its demand. The premiere episode was seen by millions and broke records, but its viewership quickly dwindled, and the show was canceled even before all its episodes had aired. Stephen King's supernatural short story, The Lawnmower Man, was crudely combined with Cybergod, a screenplay about the potential of VR. This was an attempt to draw in a bigger audience, but was against both the screenwriter and author's wishes. King later sued the studio over the debacle. The Lawnmower Man is perhaps most famous for its visualization of VR. A pre-James Bond, Pierce Brosnan plays Dr. Angelo, a brilliant scientist on the verge of a breakthrough cure for cognitive disability. His pet project is put on the chopping block after his animal test subject dies in a bloody escape attempt. In desperation, Dr. Angelo goes off the books and takes his research to the outside world. He attempts the impossible, to cure the local landscaper, Job, of his simple mind. Through experimental drugs and hypnotic VR experiences, Job slowly transforms from the village idiot into a mature and intelligent adult. But things take a turn for the worse as the treatment proves too effective. Inexplicably, Job develops telekinesis, superhuman intelligence, and becomes dangerously ambitious. He believes he's a god and seeks to punish those who wronged him.
Virtual reality is not just a simulation. It's a whole other world, a new electric dimension.
Like Frankenstein, Dr. Angelo must confront a villain of his own creation before Job can transcend to a purely digital being and conquer the world through cyberspace. Though the CGI sequences in Lawnmower Man look dated now, the film used actual VR head-mounted displays from VPL, which strongly resemble modern sets like the Oculus Rift. A lack of focus limited the movie's attempts to handle transhumanism, becoming more than human via technology. The final act devolves into an unimaginative techno-slasher flick, likely due to the late-stage script rewrite.
And once I'm inside the mainframe, I'll have access to over 5,000 other databases. And from those 5,000, I can reach out again and again and again, eventually inhabiting the entire planetary network. By the year 2001, there won't be a person on this planet who isn't hooked into it. And hooked into me.
A straight-to-video sequel with a completely new cast and crew released in 1996 and was universally panned. Matt Frewer, of Max Headroom fame, replaced Jeff Fahey as Job, the villainous god of cyberspace returning from the original. Lawnmower Man 2: Beyond Cyberspace is a whirlwind of delirium. A Mad Maxian troop of children and a professor take on Job in a virtual war. Aside from truly baffling special effects and a meandering plot, the film had some potential, but it was a box office bomb that ranked on IMDb's Worst 100 Films list for many years. Inspired by the awestruck response to serials like Twin Peaks, the now obscure Wild Palms was created by Bruce Wagner, who based it on his comic of the same name. In this miniseries, set in near-future Los Angeles, Harry Wyckoff begins to investigate strange happenings in his community. People are disappearing, and nobody wants to talk about it. A strange church is gaining followers, and the mysterious Wild Palms group is pushing hologram technology so advanced it's indistinguishable from reality. After failing to get a promotion at his law firm, Harry quits his job to work for Senator Tony Kreutzer, a political, technological, and religious figure with considerable influence. Kreutzer founded both the New Age religion, Syntheotics, and the Wild Palms Group, which is launching their cutting-edge hologram projector, Mimicom. When aided by their patented drug, Mimazine, the hologram TV characters become lifelike 3D projections you can see, hear, and even touch.
It's only the beginning. Why should this reality be public domain? What's so great about it? Tony wants a new, improved reality. Controlled by Mimicom and sold straight out of 7-Eleven. It's all there for the taking. A world where we don't have to be afraid to leave our dreams open at night.
Mass indoctrination often utilizes the media, politics, and religion. Kreutzer dominates all three. He even has his eyes set on the presidency and pursues an experimental chip that can transform his personality into an omnipresent digital projection. The mass dosing of Mimazine would effectively make him a holographic god, broadcasted to every living room in the world. The show tips its hat to cyberpunk fiction, as William Gibson makes a brief cameo after a Mimicom demonstration.
Bill!
Hey.
Harry, this is William Gibson.
Sure, Neuromancer.
He coined the word cyberspace.
And they won't let me forget. Nice to meet you, Bill.
Wild Palms peers into the dark underworld of a seemingly idyllic community. with mysterious cults and clandestine plots eating away at its core. Mainstream audiences might have been turned off by its strangeness. Conversely, the show may have appeared too mundane to sci-fi enthusiasts. But its themes of digital mesmerization and mass mind control are arguably even more relevant today. The series was made in an era before smartphones and the proliferation of personal computers. We are now under constant digital bombardment by news organizations, politics, and social media, influencing our every decision. Virtuosity stars Denzel Washington as Barnes, a disgraced former cop. His pursuit of a serial killer who murdered his family led to a deadly accident and a life sentence. Barnes is one of many participants in a trial VR training program, which pits him against a devious AI, played by Russell Crowe. SID 6.7 was pieced together from the minds of the worst serial killers in history, used as the ultimate villain in these training sessions. The latest trial proved deadly when SID found a way to kill its human users, and only Barnes survived. Facing cancellation, SID's designer releases the AI into the real world with an android body. Then all hell breaks loose. The synthetic body can harvest nearby glass particles to repair its silicon fibers, making SID practically invulnerable. As the only expert on this deadly new foe, Barnes is recruited out of desperation to track down and destroy SID. The city is brought to its knees by a power-hungry, sadistic immortal who loves the spotlight.
We have a symphony to compose.
Sid's one goal is to horrify the biggest audience possible with the highest body count imaginable. Even more disturbing, he taunts Barnes with knowledge only the killer of his wife and child would know. Virtuosity doesn't exactly break new ground, but its typical action thriller plot is elevated by a clever implementation of VR and an interesting villain, becoming another cautionary tale about the rise of artificial intelligence.
Have you ever jacked in? Have you ever wired tripped? No? A virgin brain. This isn't like TV, only better. This is life. You're there. You're doing it, seeing it, hearing it. You're feeling it. It's about the stuff that you can't have, right? Like running into a liquor store with a .357 Magnum in your hand, feeling the adrenaline pumping through your veins. I can make it happen. I can get you anything you want. You just have to talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. I'm your priest. I'm your shrink. I'm your main connection to the switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man. The Santa Claus of the subconscious. You say it. You even think it. You can have it.
James Cameron followed up the success of Terminator 2 and True Lies with a risky cyberpunk venture. Instead of an epic apocalypse or the rise of the machines, Strange Days tackles the underbelly of civilization who live vicariously through pre-recorded digital fantasies. Inspired by the extreme unrest surrounding the 1992 LA riots, Cameron penned the screenplay, and his ex-wife and filming partner, Catherine Bigelow, directed. Set in 1999, the film depicts a near-future Los Angeles on the brink of collapse, heightened by the paranoia of what the year 2000 will bring. A famous rapper and culture leader, Jericho 1, is murdered by corrupt police officers, sparking a powder keg that propels the plot forward. The centerpiece of the story is the Squid System, an illegal virtual reality machine that can record or play back an experience in all 5 senses, beamed directly to your brain. The new addiction of the modern world is reliving violence, sex, depravity, or even murder through the wearer's eyes. This results in appropriately strange and uncomfortable first-person sequences in the film, and some impressive long takes can be seen here. Ralph Fiennes plays Lenny Nero, an ex-cop who has fallen on hard times. He's now a squid dealer who brokers discs of questionable content like a drug pusher. After a selfless gift allows Lenny's disabled friend to experience running along the beach again, we see the good that's still in this flawed man, but he's stuck in the past. Lenny lives in the memories of his ex-girlfriend and previous life, as revived by the squid player, and he can't move on.
This is your life! Right here, right now! It's real time! You hear me? Real time! Time to get real, not playback. You understand me? Memories were meant to fade, Lenny. They're designed that way for a reason.
Lenny is being tormented by squid recordings of murder and threats, sent by someone who seems to be directly connected to the assassination that threatens to tear our society apart. Finding this demented mind before the whole city comes crashing down is the ticking time bomb that only Lenny and his trusted friends can defuse. Strange Days is a profound sci-fi thriller, but light on action, and wasn't a shoo-in for success. Despite earning a rare perfect score from Roger Ebert, the film was box office poison. T2 and True Lies raked in nearly $1 billion combined, yet Strange Days hustled less than $8 million, a fifth of their budget. The film's message of living in the present instead of toiling in replays of the past has become more relevant now with modern technology than it was in 1995. It has also been echoed in many works since, including the hit British anthology series Black Mirror. The obscure 1997 Italian movie, Nirvana, stars Christopher Lambert as Jimmy, a brilliant video game programmer who discovers that a virus has infected his game and granted the protagonist, Solo, sentience. The game's an advanced VR experience that feels as lifelike as the real world. Solo begins to disobey orders and questions his creator about the futility of his own existence. Unsatisfied with Jimmy's answers, Solo begs for deletion. Jimmy is wrought with guilt. His masterwork game, Nirvana, is essentially a prison of virtual inmates who have committed no crime. He recruits a couple of free-spirit cyberpunks, including his hacker friend Joystick, on a mission to shut the game down, forever. All the while, Jimmy is haunted by the mystery of why his wife, without warning, left him years ago. He hopes to win her back, or at least find closure. A now self-aware Solo partakes in Groundhog Day-style trial and error through his video game environs. When he dies, he restarts at the beginning, though now he retains his knowledge. He gets murdered by Yakuza, gangs, and assassins before resetting and trying again. Solo attempts to convince others that their world isn't real, but no one believes him, making him feel all the more isolated. The poor dubbing hinders the movie, since it was originally filmed in Italian. The film's cyberpunk look was colorful and imaginative, but it was constrained by a limited budget. Nirvana portrays optic, head, and other cyberware in impressive and sometimes stomach-churning realism. Also impressive is the way the movie shows the team jacking into cyberspace, with its security protocols, digital hallucinations, and its valuable caches hidden in its vaults. This 1990s movie foresaw the modern smart home.
Shall I draw the water for your bath?
No. Don't feel like taking a bath. Turn the TV on.
Someone's at the door.
Check it.
It's your favorite taxi, sir. Red Rover.
Oh, he's okay.
Jimmy's AI assistant manages his schedule, prompts healthy lifestyle activities, can activate appliances like baths, and warns him when someone approaches his door. Nirvana's limited release didn't make much of an impact, but it's an underexposed, sprawling cyberpunk gem that explores a world that leaves you with more questions than answers.
Jimmy?
Once I'm canceled, I turn into what?
A crystal of snow in the firmament.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Cyberpunk's innate appeal led it to surface in unrelated franchises. The sci-fi phenomenon, The X-Files, managed to top the TV charts of the late 90s, a decade dominated by sitcoms, sports, and ER. This attracted cyberpunk pioneers William Gibson and Tom Maddox to co-write 2 episodes. Kill Switch begins with a mysterious shootout at a DC diner. As the investigation unfolds, agents Mulder and Scully discover it was all a setup to kill a Silicon Valley AI genius hiding there. As they follow the clues found on the dead man's CD, an elusive hacker is using satellite weapons, surveillance, and backdoor access to hunt them down. Even more unnerving is the thought that this mysterious cyber assassin may not even be human. It's actually a secret state-of-the-art AI in a remote location connected to a powerful 45 megabit internet line, over 1,000 times faster than the average in 1998. Kill Switch spread the word of VR, cyberspace, and transcending consciousness into a digital form to more casual audiences, despite the breakneck pace of a 45-minute episode. Their second collaboration, however, was less grounded in realism. First-person shooter was a clear nod to the growing popularity of video games. The agents investigate a murder in an augmented reality entertainment facility, where one of the virtual enemies goes rogue and somehow kills people in real life. Far from the best X-Files episode, flashy special effects made it one of the most expensive. First-person shooter's dismal reception closed the door on any future collaboration with Gibson. While the world clamored for VR goggles and data suits to take over our lives, mice, keyboards, and monitors were too cheap and accessible to be replaced. You don't need full-body immersion to write emails or fill out spreadsheets. Practicality won the day, and VR took a long breather before making a big comeback in the 2010s. Cyberpunk fiction pivoted as the end of the decade neared, from bulky VR headgear showing us immersive virtual worlds to considering how we might already be living in one. The scary thing was, these theories about a simulated universe weren't as far-fetched as they might seem.
It is possible that I'm dreaming right now, and that all of my perceptions are false. René Descartes.
Imagine you were imprisoned since childhood, saw nothing outside of a dark cave. Instead, you were restrained in place, immobile, blind to yourself and others, and could only watch shadow plays projected against a cave wall, performed by unseen actors. Would you know if any other reality existed outside of the firelight illusion you see before you? This is the dilemma posed by Plato over 2,000 years ago, using the technology of the time as a reference. It's often cited as an early example of simulation theory, the hypothesis that we don't exist in reality, that we could instead be living in an artificial simulation created by advanced entities. If the cave scenario was plausible using only rods, figurines, and shadows, how compelling could simulated reality be with photorealistic graphics powered by supercomputers? The suspicion that our world may not be what we perceive it to be slowly crept into the thoughts and fears of the civilized world. For millennia, we assumed gods were the architects of our universe. It didn't occur to us until later that perhaps we, mere humans, created the elaborate dream that we live in. Around this time, Taoist philosopher Zhuang Zhou pondered the divide between our imagination and reality. He described a scenario where Zhuang flies as a butterfly in the wind, then suddenly wakes up as a man. Was he a man dreaming of a butterfly's life, or a butterfly dreaming of a man's? René Descartes later struggled with these existential ideas in 17th century France. Cartesian philosophy posits that the mind and body of each individual are distinct, separate entities, and doubts the value of perceiving reality using the 5 senses. This line of thinking was rejected in John Locke's writing as an empiricist, which could be loosely defined as what cannot be perceived should not be believed, in layman's terms. And down the philosophical rabbit hole it went, with no objective victor. In literary history, exploring the concept of simulated realities within our own reality goes back many decades. An early example was Philip K. Dick's Time Out of Joint. Ahead of the curve for 1959, the book's protagonist experiences what pop culture now calls the Mandela effect, when objects, events, and people unfamiliar to him begin to appear, and his 1950s suburbia is none the wiser. One day, he is surprised to find a placeholder card with the words "soft drink stand" in place of the real thing, and a celebrity he's never heard of called Marilyn Monroe appears in magazines, as if she always had. As the world he knows slowly unfurls, he and his friend try to escape this apparently artificial dimension he's trapped in. PKD later explored how media, politics, and culture can form a simulated reality based on agreement rather than facts. The Simulacra tells of a despotic world government that is actually a sham, puppeteered by hidden figures behind the curtains. They install a permanent First Lady and replace her when she grows frail or dies to continue the ruse. Her role holds the real power, as the president is secretly an android, replaced every few years by the latest model. It's all a stage act to give a show of leadership. This is met with sparse opposition, as all media has been consolidated and all political parties have merged. An actress playing the role of First Lady and a cybernetic imitation of a president create the illusion of power and leadership where none exists. The bottom line is that accepted beliefs hold more sway than rejected truths. Even outside of his fiction, PKD seemed to be a staunch believer of simulation theory. He shared this at a speech in France he gave in 1977.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu.
In 1981, Jean Baudrillard compiled many of these ideas in the often cited but seldom understood Simulacra and Simulation, which references the fiction of Philip K. Dick several times. This was a cerebral look at the sociological effects of imagery. The book defines simulacra as imitations of completely non-existent things or places, such as Disneyland, whereas simulations are symbols that represent a real-life counterpart, like a photograph or a video. He discusses how signs of varying accuracy that symbolize everything around us overshadow the real thing, thus damaging our perception of reality. Even more disconcerting with the advent of the internet, smartphones, and computers, we as a society see the real world less and less. Instead, we rely on opinionated articles, edited videos, and biased information in place of viewing reality firsthand. This is referred to as hyperreality, a condition in which reality and simulation are seamlessly blended together, so there's no clear distinction between where one ends and the other begins. Cyberpunk has always had an anti-authority streak, and what's more punk than challenging the validity of our universe? They want to know that what they're fighting for is real, not a facsimile of it, and would accept no less. It's no surprise then that as we approach the new millennium, our skepticism reawakened. Were we living in reality or a computerized dream? As our digital renaissance reached its apex, 4 of the decade's most significant films would release. Their common threads were rebellion, challenging authority, and riding the technological wave, perfectly capturing the cultural zeitgeist of the time. Each of these explore simulated reality in a variety of ways, with their own unique philosophies and imaginative consequences. Alex Proyas, director of the Gothic trendsetter The Crow, co-wrote and directed what is arguably his most important film, Dark City, a reality-bending neo-noir story with a sinister twist. The film is set in an indistinct city in a timeless era, and there's something strange looming around every corner. A man named Murdoch wakes up alone, without clothes, without memories, and its only companion is a corpse in the next room. Horrified, he escapes the hotel he awoke in, on a hunt to rediscover who he really is. He tries to reconnect with a wife he doesn't remember, but is pursued by an intrepid detective and hunted by a group of unsettling strangers wielding knives and supernatural powers.
Sleep now.
They seem to know much more about Murdoch than he does, as if he is the center of some dark conspiracy. Is this all a lie, or did he really lose his mind in a murderous rage? On the run, wanted for a string of murders, there's something going on here that Murdoch can't explain. He asks questions the detective can't easily answer. When did you last visit the beach? Which day did your mother give you her final gift? What was the last time you saw daylight?
Daylight? When was the last time you remember seeing it? And I'm not talking about some distant, half-forgotten childhood memory. I mean, like yesterday? Last week? When? Can you come up with a single memory? You can't, can you? You know something? I don't think the sun even exists in this place. So I've been up for hours and hours and hours, and the night never ends here.
That is crazy.
You're damn right, this is crazy.
In desperation, Murdoch defends himself with inexplicable powers. Tuning, as the strangers call it, warping reality in front of his own eyes. His attackers flee, bewildered that Murdoch learned how to use their own skills against them. It is unclear whether tuning is essentially mind over matter, or whether it's magic, or as Clark put it, sufficiently advanced technology to be indistinguishable from magic. The movie proudly wears noir aesthetics and themes, but its vintage feel and inconclusive technology make it difficult to label as cyberpunk, despite it often being hailed as such. Nevertheless, Dark City was a fascinating, mind-bending experience to those who saw it.
And there was always an enormous tension there between me and the studios in terms of me wanting it to be as out there as I possibly could make it, and them wanting to be either a smaller budget or to dumb it down, you know.
We tested the unfinished film before an audience, and sure enough, one day Alex called me and said, guess what? The studio wants us to write some kind of prologue or a voiceover.
It's probably the only time a film I've made is actually tested badly. You start to second guess yourself, you know, you start to lose faith in what you're doing.
But you know, you get to the point where you sort of worry that maybe they're right. You know, that maybe it does require a little explanation. Maybe the audience is lost.
Unfortunately, the theatrical cut was hampered by studio intervention, very similar to Blade Runner's troubled production. The frantic editing was corrected, and an unnecessary and plot-spoiling monologue was removed in the director's cut of the film, released 10 years later. The movie had tepid box office results, but again, similar to Blade Runner, it eventually became a cult classic beloved by many, decades on.
You see, I have become the monster you were intended to be.
Released the next year, 13th Floor is another neo-noir story, this time revolving around a corporate murder mystery set against a bleeding-edge, immersive virtual reality experience. This movie was the second time Daniel F. Galloy's 1964 sci-fi novel, Simulacron 3, was adapted. First in Germany as the 1973 serial miniseries World on a Wire, and later an American movie was made. The book was a somber, thought-provoking story about a computer-simulated city full of realistic, virtual inhabitants used for marketing and opinion research. However, the 1999 movie adaptation takes the concept in a new direction. When the inventor of a groundbreaking VR technology turns up dead, the company's future is thrown into chaos. His friend and protege, Douglas, is trying to uncover the killer's identity and uses the VR technology to find clues in his investigation. All the while, the police suspect everyone around him. Users can delve into a computer simulation of 1930s Los Angeles, contrasting their rambunctious, nostalgic fantasy in the VR experience and our cynical, corporate reality. When people enter the VR world, they take over the bodies of artificial denizens, modeled after themselves, as their virtual avatars. But as the investigation leads down a disturbing path, virtual folks become suspicious when they meet the man Douglas is possessing, who seems to have a completely changed personality hour by hour. This drives one man into paranoia, digging for answers until he uncovers the truth, that the world and everything he knows is a lie. In the real world, Douglas is intrigued and intoxicated by the mysterious woman who suddenly shows up to uncover her father's assassin, but nothing is quite as it appears. It's a ticking clock thriller. This early version of the VR experience must be limited to short sessions, or the user could die, and every second lost is more time for the murderer to plot their next victim. Some harsh moral conundrums are brought up when real-world humans possess simulated inhabitants, violating their free will and messing with their lives. A loyal husband is guilt-stricken over acts he didn't commit. He blacks out for hours at a time, only to come home smelling like another woman's perfume.
My wife thinks I have some kind of secret love life.
What about memory flashes? Deja vu. I'm talking about fantasies.
Yes. Yes, I do have them. I found this a couple of days ago. I'm married over 35 years now, and not once have I cheated on my wife. Not once.
The 13th Floor has strong imagery and ideas, paying homage to classic noir and exploring the morality of playing God with a virtual society. Unfortunately, an early scene and the film's marketing spoiled some later story reveals. Though not a household name now, the 13th Floor might have had more influence were it not up against such stiff competition that year.
What was your life like before?
Before?
Before it was changed by Allegra Geller.
I operated a gas station.
You still operate a gas station, don't you?
Only on the most pathetic level of reality.
Released just a month apart was the biopunk sci-fi thriller Existenz, directed by David Cronenberg, most known for his gory, psychological horror films of the 70s and 80s. In the near future, an experimental new VR technology called GamePods are invented. They're a queasy mutation of amphibian organs, formed into a fleshy video game console that connects to your spine like an umbilical cord, feeding off your metabolism and completely immersing you into a game. At the start of the film, an innovative designer is demonstrating her new game, along with a few volunteer players, to an exclusive audience. Each player takes control of an important character in the game's storyline, with non-player characters filling out the roster. Video game elements are shown, like pause loops between an NPC's dialogue to allow players to respond. Players must solve puzzles to proceed, and violence is always an option to push the game along. This harmless demonstration turns deadly when a deeper conflict is revealed. Corporate rivals have planted spies and assassins into the game, and will stop at nothing to monopolize this booming industry. Moreover, a group of fanatics called the Realists aim to kill the game designer for her sinful deformation of reality. Existenz is full of twists and turns. Enemies become friends, friends become enemies, and what you think is real may just be part of the elaborate narrative crafted by the game designer. The story is presented in such a visceral way, it's like a twisted dream you can't wake up from. Cronenberg's trademark practical effects, seen in the organic machines, gadgets, and peripherals, make for repulsive moments of body horror. Existenz challenges our perception of reality, shocks us with the idea of biocomputers, and explores our natural rejection of more immersive entertainment. Its unforgettable imagery makes the film stand out from its peers.
I don't like it here. I don't know what's going on. Stumbling around together in this unformed world whose rules and objectives are largely unknown, seemingly indecipherable, or even possibly non-existent. Always on the verge of being killed by forces that we don't understand.
Sounds like my game, all right.
It sounds like a game. It's not going to be easy to market.
But it's a game everybody's already playing.
These films combined noir, corporate espionage, and technophilia to weave fascinating cyberpunk tales, but their releases were sandwiched between the anticipated 15-year return of Star Wars in May 1999 and one of the biggest game changers in cinematic history that March. Matrix was a massive hit that nobody saw coming, and came to overshadow nearly all sci-fi movies that year after The Phantom Menace failed to meet expectations. The movie was both a critical and financial sleeper hit. It's become so ingrained into our vocabulary and culture, little can be said about it that hasn't already. Like all other popular works, it's garnered a huge fan base who praised it for being original, and many detractors who lambasted it for being derivative. But one thing is beyond question. The Matrix was a cultural milestone, along the lines of Jurassic Park and Star Wars, treasured for decades after its release. With only 2 smaller Hollywood gigs under their belts, writer-director duo the Wachowskis brought their ambitious sci-fi script to producer Joel Silver, along with their biggest inspiration, Ghost in the Shell. During the pitch, they told him, "We want to do that for real." They joined forces, the Wachowskis' love of sci-fi, comics, and anime, and Silver's prolific action movie career. Leaps of faith played a large part in both the film's production and on screen. The team pitched The Matrix to then Warner Brothers executive Lorenzo de Bonaventura. The duo's first art house film barely broke even, so pitching a big-budget sci-fi thriller was a huge gamble. Many redrafts later, they hired comic artists to draw a massive 600-page storyboard covering every single scene in the film. They finally got their deal with Warner Brothers, but had to shoot in Australia to cut costs. Bonaventura later said of the pitch, "I knew if I was going to make a leap of faith, this was the one to make." The movie centers on a man who leads 2 lives. Thomas Anderson is a wage slave software programmer by day. Neo is a hacker who spends his sleepless nights scouring the internet for Morpheus, an alleged terrorist who knows the coveted secret of the Matrix. Neo is pursued by both Morpheus' allies and mysterious agents who try to coerce and blackmail him into selling out his new cohorts. After a run-in with these agents, straight out of a nightmare, Neo isn't even sure he's awake or still dreaming, a recurring theme and a nod to the ideas in Zhuang Zhou's Butterfly Dream. Allusions to Alice in Wonderland highlight the analogy of tumbling down the rabbit hole into a dream world. When he finally meets Morpheus, Neo must make a choice. Take the red pill to learn the truth of his existence, or take the blue pill and live in blissful ignorance forever. After all, you cannot be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
Reflections are recurring imagery in the film. You see 2 people reflected in Morpheus' mirror shades. One is Thomas Anderson looking at the blue pill, and the other is Neo reaching for the red pill. After Neo makes his choice, he is rushed violently out of his illusory world for the very first time. Morpheus explains to Neo that the world he knew is a virtual prison built for the human mind, while millions are harvested as living batteries. Quite a pill to swallow. The weight of humanity's freedom rests on Neo's reluctant shoulders when he learns of the prophecy foretold by the Oracle, that he is destined to become the One, the savior of mankind, who can bend the laws of the Matrix to his will. We see firsthand the dizzying withdrawals of Neo, deprogramming from a lifelong lie. How devastated would you be if you discovered that decades of your existence never happened? They were only ones and zeros on a computer. The few freed humans now reside in the real world, a wasteland scoured by the machine overlords who created the Matrix and now dominate Earth. Among these are the ship's crew that rescued Neo, a ragtag group of hackers and cyberpunks. They use instanced VR spaces to train and hone their skills to get ready to return to the Matrix. Neo can jack in, upload a program directly into his mind, and in a blink of an eye, he knows Kung Fu. The crew members utilize a pirate signal to hack into the Matrix wirelessly to undergo missions and rescues. When jacked in, Morpheus' crew can focus their minds to bend this computer simulation beyond the laws of physics, but danger lurks around every corner. The machines patrol their systems for intruders and anomalies, and have the power to assume control over anyone still wired into the Matrix. This instantly transforms them into an agent, a superhuman soldier, programmed to eliminate any threat to their virtual order.
Inside the Matrix, They are everyone, and they are no one.
To show the physics-bending antics of the Matrix visually, the crew mixed John Woo-style shootouts, Hong Kong martial arts choreography, and experimental filming techniques. The movie popularized bullet time. To achieve this effect, they shot a still image sequence using a ring of cameras, then used computer interpolation to create mind-blowing action scenes in a style never seen before. Then there's the classic lobby scene, which combined martial arts, wire fu, and heart-pounding gunplay into an electronic symphony of violence. These groundbreaking scenes couldn't be done by faceless stunt doubles alone. The actors had to train for several months in rigorous stunt work and martial arts under expert Hong Kong choreographer Yuen Woo-ping. Despite its profound subject matter, The Matrix is a tightly woven story, which hits all its plot points in a metronomic pace. An alternative edit or director's cut was never needed or wanted.
In the last week of mixing, I took out 2 frames because the visual effect had come in and it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And I felt that this cut wasn't quite right. I figured this is the end. This is what's going to be there forever now. And I wanted it to be right.
The movie's unmistakable style is heard in its soundtrack as well, featuring electronica hits such as Spy Break and Club to Death, as well as rock earworms like Rob Zombie's Dragula. It quickly became one of the must-have albums of the decade. It's in the original score that you hear the movie's themes in audio form. Composer Don Davis used orchestral strings and brass to represent the real world, and synthesized symphonics to portray the simulated world. 2 sides, one natural, one synthetic, which reflect one another. The movie brought a unique mix of never-before-seen special effects and an emotional and evocative plot that everyone, cyberpunk fan or not, could resonate with. A legacy of great works benefit and inspire all new creations, and The Matrix is no exception. The film was a kaleidoscope of ideas, both new and old. It took great inspiration from the opening credits, high-octane action, and themes of Ghost in the Shell. But as it was revised in the script phase, the story remained similar thematically, but very different in execution. Contrary to popular belief, William Gibson wasn't the first to coin the term Matrix to mean a virtual universe. It was first used as such in a 1976 Doctor Who episode, Deadly Assassin. Its novelization described The Matrix as a virtual world that feels as real as reality. And similar to the movie it would later inspire, if you died inside the simulation, you would die in reality.
Trillions of electrochemical cells in a continuous matrix, a master pattern. The matrix is a huge communal brain. It monitors the life of the capital and makes provision for the future. We use its accumulated wisdom and experience to predict future events and plan how to deal with them.
There are textural similarities to William Gibson's Neuromancer, such as jacking into cyberspace, the remote colony of Zion, and all-powerful artificial intelligences vying for control. The parallels between Molly Millions and Trinity have also drawn scrutiny, but this is more likely an homage rather than theft. Many have claimed the film stole its style and plot from a Grant Morrison comic. The Invisibles is an offbeat series where trans-dimensional entities take the bodies of humans as their agents of evil. Some cite that King Mob's torture scene in Volume 1 was repurposed for the movie. However, The Invisibles has such a variety of settings, characters, and plots that the occasional echo between the two is inevitable. Both works have common roots in Gnosticism, the belief of attaining salvation through gaining spiritual knowledge. Philip K. Dick's Valis, the Illuminatus trilogy, and many other sci-fi works share these philosophies as well. These claims have gotten so overblown, you'll rarely hear mention of the Invisibles absent from the Matrix plagiarism allegations, a disservice to both works. Dark City and The Matrix often get compared as well. Both have a lone hero who gains mysterious powers to overcome a dark force, which is changing the world as we know it, and that our sense of reality isn't what it seems. Given the slow-moving cogs of Hollywood, both projects had already been in development since the early 90s. Many similarities were simply coincidence, but these movies had some direct connections as well. In December 1997, producer Andrew Mason was negotiating with the Wachowskis to shoot in Sydney. As a showcase of what the city could offer, he invited them to an early screening of his recently completed film, Dark City. Since its earliest drafts, the Matrix script and storyboards had called for street, building, and rooftop scenes similar to the ones in Dark City, so they decided to reuse some of these existing sets for cost efficiency. This was common practice, but would later raise suspicions because of the proximity of the movie's themes and release dates. After Warner Brothers signed them in 1996, the Wachowskis spent 2 years redrafting, storyboarding, and training their cast in preparation for their shoot, just days after Dark City's premiere on February 27, 1998. The assumption that this was all thrown out on a whim, violating their contractual obligations, just doesn't add up. Aside from some visual and thematic similarities in Dark City and The Invisibles, The Matrix has attracted myriad claims of plagiarism, ranging from the superficial to the unprovable to the downright bizarre.
So The Matrix is really just a set of questions, a mechanism for prodding an ignorant or dulled mind into questioning as many things as possible. Andrew Mason.
The Matrix combined the bleak predictions of cyberculture with philosophy going back millennia. The film's grand ideas, visuals, and action made it palatable for the mainstream. Unlike its more somber peers, the film works even if its philosophy goes over your head. It distilled many of the questions that humans have struggled with since the dawn of time. Do we truly have free will, or are we enslaved to the whims of destiny? Is the truth always better than the bliss found in the shadows of the cave? The Matrix channels these questions into our modern-day, technological world, breathing new life and relevance into them. Neo disapproves of the idea that he isn't in control of his own life. Yet when he meets the Oracle who foresaw the rise of the One, she seems to know a lot about him, and even predicts minor events right before they happen. This shakes Neo's beliefs on fate when she teases him with a concept of self-fulfilling prophecy. Would he have still broken the vase if she had said nothing? The Matrix was heavily inspired by Baudrillard's work. Simulacra and simulation even appears as an Easter egg in the first act of the film. The movie references the book's interpretation of Borges' Parable, a story inspired by an older one by Lewis Carroll, about not confusing the map with the territory it represents. In this story, imperial cartographers are challenged to create the perfect map. But as they continue to expand it with increasing detail, the map eventually spans their empire at a 1-to-1 ratio, thus becoming useless and falling into decay. Simulacra and simulation follows this analogy up with its own twist. What if the real world were to decline and erode away, leaving only the map of what once was? If we were to peer underneath it, we'd only observe the remnants of reality. Or
the desert of the real.
This book and several others were mandatory reading for the main cast. Yet despite how much the movie's writers revered his work, Baudrillard disliked how The Matrix made too clean a distinction between simulation and reality. His philosophy argues that in our modern society, the two are inextricable. The Matrix features a simulation created by the machines and a real world inhabited by humanity's survivors. The film glosses over the fact that reality itself has many simulated aspects, such as VR training programs, computer screens, and the countless signs and symbols on the crew's ship. The film's color grading betrays Baudrillard's philosophy as well. Scenes inside the Matrix are distinctly green, the VR constructs have natural color, and the real world has a bluish tint. This was a deliberate decision to aid viewer comprehension and empower the film's emotional impact. But even as scrutinizing the movie highlights the divide between the filmmakers and the philosopher, neither are wrong per se. but simply have different attitudes and goals. With all the buzz surrounding it, William Gibson expected to hate the film, but after seeing it twice, he was quite positive about The Matrix and debunked the claims that the movie stole his ideas.
I thought it was more like Dick's work than mine, though more coherent, saner than I generally take Dick to have been. A Dickian universe with fewer moving parts. For Dick, I suspect all of the parts were always moving parts. A Dickian universe with a solid bottom. It's thematically Gnostic, something Neuromancer isn't. Whatever of my work may be there, it seems to me to have gotten there by exactly the kind of creative, cultural osmosis I've always depended on myself. If there's Neuromancer in The Matrix, there's The Star's My Destination and Dahlgren in Neuromancer. When I began to write Neuromancer, there was no cyberpunk. The Matrix is arguably the ultimate cyberpunk artifact.
The movie was so popular in the mainstream, it unfortunately obscures any definition of The Matrix in older works. That term was now synonymous with the movie, for better or worse. The Matrix is easily one of the most influential films of the 20th century. It was soon parodied and referenced in hundreds of movies, shows, and games. It made such a cultural impact that The Matrix has become the de facto term for simulated reality in general. Though its inspirations are countless, the movie transcended from niche science fiction to become the anthem of a world frustrated by boundaries, limits, and restrictions, and its impact is still felt today.
I went to the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank to meet the writers and directors of a film entitled The Matrix. They had written something that I had never seen, but in a way, something that I'd always hoped, as an actor, as a fan of science fiction. The script that they wrote, it had Gibson, it had Verne, it had K. Dick, Frank Miller, anime, Kurosawa, Peckinpah. It was Nietzsche. It was Buddha. It was Christ. It was themes and levels. It was dualities, modalities, realities, dreams, will, destiny, freedom, slavery of the mind, of the body, the construct, who lives, who dies, identity, sexuality, viruses, and love. It was mythology, philosophy, technology, and truth. What truth?
Incidentally, The Matrix also supercharged mainstream interest in simulation theory. The movie inspired its own religions, cults, and communities who believe our universe is a computer program. On a more philosophic and scientific front, however, Swedish philosopher Nick Bostrom wrote an article in 2003 describing the possibility that our world is artificial.
If we're living in a simulation, then the cosmos that we are observing is just a tiny piece of the totality of physical existence. While the world we see is, in some sense, real, it is not located at the fundamental level of reality. Nick Bostrom.
Are you living in a computer simulation? Proposed the following trilemma. Either we as a species are incapable of surviving until a post-human civilization is achieved. A post-human civilization wouldn't be interested in creating simulations of their historical or evolutionary past, or that some of our lived experiences are in fact a simulation. Bostrom doesn't definitively argue that we are inside a simulated universe. Instead, he states one of these three scenarios is undoubtedly true, a fascinating theory that has been argued for and against by many of the brightest minds of our time. Some claim that we may have lifelike simulations one day in the future, but we do not yet live in them. Conversely, engineers have argued that a universe-wide simulation at an atomic level would require an astronomical amount of computing power, to a point where the task would be insurmountable.
The real question is, what are the limits of computing powers? Martin Reyes.
It's a sobering crossroads of sci-fi and scientific research, which has sparked countless internet discussions and has many celebrity proponents, such as billionaire tech mogul Elon Musk. While we may have gone off the deep end at the turn of the new millennium with philosophic and existential questions, one thing was clear. What we see in our world is mirrored and expanded upon in fiction, and in turn, these stories would encourage us to build the future we dreamed of. The year 2000 didn't come with flying cars, cyborgs, or Martian cities. However, many of the challenges that come with living in a computerized world would be realized. We were now joined at the hip with technology, but through a painful growing period, we came out of it a transformed society, perhaps with fewer metal arms and cybernetic eyes than we expected. Look out for the next installment of this series, where we'll discover how the 2000s reached great heights before leading to a decline in cyberpunk media. And thank you for watching.